There's a saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I've always thought that saying is very poignant. Our photos capture memories of ceremony, celebration, and raw emotion. Whether it's a sailor kissing a nurse or a candid moment from a backyard barbecue, you can see more than what is there in front of you. It can stir feelings for people you've never met, give you a glimpse into the past, or simply make you happy. An image of a 10-year-old girl named Lindsay can do that to me. I didn't know her, but there in her smile you can see her friendliness and charm. In her eyes you can imagine how mischievous she could be. And in her clothing and poses you can imagine her as the life of the party. In the image you can see this girl is full of life and has a load of exciting stories to tell in her future. She's frozen in time there in that image, and it's hard to imagine any other kind of ending than one that is happy. But alas, this is a true crime podcast, so the story I'm going to tell does not have a happy ending. On June 26, 2009, a little girl went missing in the tiny logging town of McCleary, Washington. It had been a hot Friday summer day, and 10-year-old Lindsay Baum and her 12-year-old brother Josh spent the early part of the day with their friends at a neighborhood pool party just a few blocks from home. That evening, Lindsay and Josh walked to their friend Michaela's house, where Lindsay hoped to convince her friend's parents to let them have yet another sleepover. At some point during their walk, Lindsay and her brother got into an argument about a bike. His bike, she had borrowed it and left it somewhere without his permission. Josh decided to storm off and head home, leaving Lindsay alone to negotiate her sleepover. But Lindsay wasn't far behind her brother, as the sleepover didn't work out. Since her brother had already left, Lindsay started the 10-minute walk home on her own. But it seems she wasn't alone for long. Somewhere between departing the doorstep of her friend's home and arriving at the doorstep of her own home, Lindsay Baum disappeared. The last confirmed sighting of Lindsay was at 9:15 p.m. that night. A local resident saw her walking along Maple Street between 5th and 6th. This was the halfway point between her and her friend Michaela's home. Understandably, Lindsay's mom grew frantic. She expected her home by 9:30. As it grew darker outside, her mom called her daughter's cell phone over and over, but it was a complete blow when she realized the phone was in Lindsay's room. After calling all of her friends and finding out that no one was with her or knew where she was, her mother Melissa called police to report her missing just before 11 o'clock at night. Initially, discussion turned to the possibility that 10-year-old Lindsay had run away from home or might be hiding in the woods. The reason? The fight with her brother over the bicycle. Perhaps she stormed off in a fit of anger. Her mother always described her as a bit of a firecracker with a flair for dramatics. But as the darkness set in, it became less likely. Lindsay had a well-known fear of the dark. It's a very small town, roughly 1,600 people, and police were familiar with the family, so officers quickly got on their radios and began searching. It was 3 a.m. when Grays Harbor County Sheriff Rick Scott determined that this was more than a stubborn kid who wanted some time alone. This was a real search and rescue mission for a missing child. She had no phone, no money, and no provisions with her. By Sunday, the entire town was involved. Everyone feared something terrible had happened to Lindsay, but no one wanted to guess what it could have been. Everyone was searching their properties, looking for any possible sign of her. By the following Monday, the search focused on an off-road vehicle park called Grays Harbor ORV Park. Dozens of searchers, dogs, helicopters combed the area for hours. For 10 days, the search continued. Search by helicopter, with canine units, a walking grid, and even search by horseback. But there was no trace, no clues, just the single sighting of a lone 10-year-old girl walking home that Friday night on Maple Street. Everyone's thoughts turned to the dark realization that she wasn't just missing, she had been taken. The case quickly grew to have nearly 100 law enforcement officers and FBI agents involved. They wanted to start compiling a list of suspects, and they moved quickly. They started with interviewing neighbors, pulling records of people who used credit cards in the area, requesting a list of cell phone users whose phones pinged off of the single cell phone tower in the town, and requesting surveillance video from every local business. It wasn't long until the persons of interest list grew to 40 people. It was a long process to interview each one, but with each suspect, there would be speculation, a warrant, maybe even an arrest. But ultimately, there just wasn't enough evidence for any charges. From interviewing Lindsay's mother, police got information on 2 strange incidents that happened the weeks prior to Lindsay's disappearance. The first was her and her friend were playing at a local park, and then they went to the public restroom. While they were in the women's restroom, a man entered, a grown man. This was obviously very startling to the girls, who quickly ran out to go tell their moms. The second occurrence happened a few days later. The girls were walking around town in the afternoon when they noticed a man in a white car following them slowly around the neighborhood. No one knows for sure if this is the same man from the bathroom, but it could be very likely. Could these incidents be connected to her disappearance? I'd say probably, but that was just what the sheriff was trying to understand. While reviewing the many hours of surveillance video from around the time of the disappearance, they got a new lead. There, in one of the videos pulled from a local gas station, was a vehicle matching the description of the white car the girls saw following them. I'm not certain if the car in the video was matched to a specific individual, but I do know that warrants were served on another individual with a white sports car. In the video from the gas station, the car seen as a kind of sports utility car truck hybrid. The other white car mentioned in the affidavit for a warrant was described as a white sports car, which to me speaks to a smaller vehicle, but it very well could be the exact same vehicle. I'm sorry I don't have any more clarity on that. But if it was the same vehicle, it would make a lot of sense why police fixated on this suspect. The man with the white sports car was of significant interest to police. He apparently worked near Lindsay's residence in a retirement home. He was originally brought in for questioning because a neighbor called police to report seeing a man in his car in the area the night she disappeared. The tipster noted that the car had a loud exhaust, and they found it suspicious that he wasn't seen around town for several days after that night. When police began looking into this man, they learned that he had a second job at a youth camp. The man told police he had been at the youth camp the night in question, so there was no way he could have had anything to do with Lindsay's disappearance. But police spoke to the supervisor of the camp and learned that the man had been suspended 2 weeks prior. Thus, there was no reason he would have been at the camp that night. His alibi was null and void.
Is it ballsy or stupid to think, here's my alibi? They're not going to call and check.
I think you're scrambling, right? I mean, in my eyes, it's
yeah,
like,
if you have nothing, you panic and go, I work at a youth camp, and that's where I was.
Yeah, but part of you has to think they're not going to look into it. Like, they're just going to be like, oh, okay, valid. Yeah, it is pretty shocking to me that you would just assume that's going to fly.
It's curious of just, does it come from that ego side of, I get away with anything and look at me and I'm going to toy with the cops? Or is it like, are you an actual idiot?
Right.
And
if you didn't have anything to do with it, like, are you thinking that's not going to put more heat on you when you're discovered for lying? Like,
well, you look at Casey Anthony. Yeah, it's
good point. She got a really good lawyer, though. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the alibi, the whole walking through Universal and all that, but.
The man's former girlfriend also gave police additional information of concern. She said that the day after Lindsay disappeared, the man told her how he was very concerned of what could have happened to her, and he couldn't believe someone would take a girl and cut her up and dismember her, which, of course, was not something police were even remotely considering. No one was calling this a homicide.
And it's horrifically specific.
Right. It is so specific. Why would someone say that?
Even if you see that on the news, you go, I can't believe someone would do that.
Abduct someone.
Or even, or hurt a girl or do that. You don't say, you don't look at Jeffrey Dahmer and go, I can't believe someone cut open a person's brain and put fluid on it and tried to, you go, I can't believe someone did that to another human.
Well, they definitely thought it was suspicious.
Yeah, I do.
Another man, Tim Hartman, was also lingering on the suspect list after it was discovered he also gave false information. Hartman is a local jeweler who, when interviewed by police, denied being in McCleary the time of the disappearance. He claimed that he was out doing a training for his volunteer work as an EMT, and he didn't get back into town until very late that night. Upon review of video surveillance from a local business, police clearly established that this was a lie. He was seen on camera making a purchase at 9:15 p.m., the exact time the last confirmed sighting of Lindsay occurred. He was in a convenience store a short distance from his business. It just so happens his business is located on 4th Street, which is right on the path Lindsey would have taken to go home. Hartman told police his lie wasn't actually a lie, that he was just unintentionally giving false information because he wasn't paying attention to the time. He thought he got back into town later than he actually did. Now, Hartman actually drove Lindsay's mom to a creek where Lindsay liked to play to help look for her. Now, we've heard in other cases where the perpetrator actually volunteers to help search. So it makes you question, is this a bad guy or is he simply just a guy trying to help out a local family? One odd thing that came out of that search was people, when searching the area, were instructed to leave a marker to show everyone else that they had actually searched the area.
Oh, yeah, to have it cleared.
Right. Mm-hmm. So he claimed he searched that area by the creek with the mom. The next day, there were no markers. So it was very suspicious. So is he lying? Was he mistaken? We don't really know. Hartman brought police a certification that he had gotten from the training to prove that he was there. And he said that it took place in another town and it ended at 9 p.m., which would have made it very hard for him to have gotten back into town in time. However, the FBI said that it actually ended at 8:30, which would have given him enough time to get back into town. So as you can see, there's a lot of small discrepancies coming from him, but 30 minutes is not a long time to mess up your time.
Yeah, it's questionable and definitely red flags, but it's almost consistently off.
Right. Like a normal person, if you're not watching the clock, if you have no reason to get somewhere at a specific time, you might be off a half hour.
Right. I mean, even the search, it's like, okay, maybe I was in the wrong spot and I meant that. Like, if you just aren't that detail oriented and you don't think that way, that sounds fairly consistent.
Right.
So they're obviously red flags when you add this element of this girl missing, but on their own, it's like, oh, this guy's just kind of aloof and.
Right. And the police were suspicious. So they do search his home, his car, his business. They didn't find anything. He was not arrested. However, he was interrogated for 8 hours and he took 2 polygraph tests. So he claims that the first test he was told he passed, only to be later told by someone he actually failed and needed to take another one. When he took the second one, it was inconclusive. So I don't know if they were just digging to try to find
probably messing with him, like, oh, you're going to have to come in.
Right. But to be fair, there was no official evidence connecting Hartman to Lindsay. The sheriff's office has publicly said he is not officially a suspect, but that doesn't mean he's not still a person of interest. For years, law enforcement has continued to work the Lindsay Baum case, conducting interviews, chasing new leads, talking to media, searching properties, hoping someone somewhere knows something and would come forward. But as the years stretch on, that seemed progressively less likely. In 2017, the startling discovery of 5 decades of depraved secrets just minutes north of Seattle would offer the Baum case yet another new lead. 3 elderly brothers lived in a North Seattle home since 1962. As you can imagine, a home lived in that long tends to be a bit of a hoarder situation. The eldest brother, Charles, had just turned 82 and was diagnosed with dementia. It was time to move him from the home that he shared with his brothers into a senior care facility. To assist in the move, a niece was contacted to help go through Charles Emery's possessions. As she started on the garage, she stumbled upon something that would chill her to the bone. Box upon box stuffed with items she could never unsee. Piles of images depicting child sexual abuse. She contacted police on August 9th to report what she had found. This marks the day that the Seattle House of Horror was discovered. All 3 brothers were arrested for possessing visual or printed matter depicting a minor engaged in sexually explicit conduct. Each were held on $500,000 bail, which couldn't be afforded, so they sat in jail awaiting trial. I read the court documents for this, and I will say the whole case sounds just as disturbing with legal terminology. But in those documents, the home was described as, quote, littered from floor to ceiling with child exploitation images, children's clothing articles, toys, and movies. To be clear, the defendants have no biological children, nor have children resided with the defendants, end quote.
So not just the garage, but the actual house
the
itself.
Entire house. Every room.
3 brothers.
Every storage unit. Everything. Buried under the stairs. You name it. Since the early discovery, more details have surfaced around what was found in the home. Boxes upon boxes of pornographic images of underage girls, young girls' clothing and shoes, magazine clippings of missing and murdered young girls. These were advertisements in magazines, newspapers.
Like what you get in the Clipper, like
Yep.
at the back with.
Not only that,
kids.
flyers, newspaper articles, you name it. And on them were handwritten notes detailing the kidnapping, torturing, raping, and murder of young girls. As police dug deeper into the home, they found dozens of pairs of children's shoes, most of which were penny loafer style, with the pennies still in the shoes. They found worn underwear, girls' worn underwear, and many, many notes written on paper, as well as those magazine clippings detailing how the brothers wanted to do satanic sacrifices of children, commit sexual abuse, as well as supply alcohol to children. In fact, one of the shoes found in the house had a small bottle of vodka shoved inside of it, and it had a note with the initials of a female relative, and it read, SK's first half ounce of liquor came from this bottle. Which makes me wonder if the pennies, if the dates on the pennies maybe correlate with anything.
Oh,
if that's why they had them. It's just a weird shoe style. They are old-fashioned.
Yeah.
They also found books and photographs documenting child homicides in detail, a sexual device, a box of unused and used condoms, and several rolls of microfilm, yet to be described in the documentation as it was not yet developed. One finding sparked a lot of speculation. It was a burned child's pink hat located in one of the crawl spaces. It was partially buried. So there were whispers that this particular item maybe had links to a more serious crime.
Yeah, because that they actually tried to hide away as opposed to everything
partially
else just being
buried.
out.
It was definitely a red flag for them. Before alerting authorities, the niece did admit to burning and throwing away some of the discovered materials. She described these to police as sexually explicit pornography, clothing, and shoes and toys. And I think they were hers. I think they belonged to her family, and she wanted to destroy them as to not bring further embarrassment.
That would make sense.
'Cause there was
because
so
if you're
much.
gonna destroy it, why wouldn't you destroy everything if you're turning them in?
I think she was protecting
Why
her
would you-
family.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Edwin Emery, the youngest of the brothers, was born November 17th, 1938, and he had some interesting notes in his file. In early 2013, he had been investigated after taking his computer to be repaired. The technician who worked on it discovered photos of nude children among the files stored in the computer. When police reviewed the computer, they discovered 20 total images, which included, quote, child erotica and, quote, nudist colony activity. The images have terribly graphic titles that I'm going to avoid naming, but should you feel the need for that information, the HuffPost article linked in our sources does contain the court documentation where you can see all the names of the files. When police questioned him back in 2013, he told them that he was attracted to sub-teenage girls. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, that means approaching your teens and often refers to girls between like 11 and 12.
It's like tweens.
Right.
Yeah.
He also admitted to sexually abusing young children when he was in his 20s, noting that not just him, but also his brothers liked to look at pornography, child pornography. And before you ask, no, it does not appear that he went to jail for this discovery. It seems like it was swept under the rug and he went on with his life.
Boys will be boys.
Likely because he's elderly. You know, that
Yeah.
was my first guess. Now, Edwin, according to himself, was the only computer user in the home. The brothers relied on him for the child pornography images. He described to detectives that he would print off the images and give them to them, and any image located in the house was likely created by his printer. Thomas Emery, born July 14th, 1937, was committed to the maximum 9 months for the charges laid against him. Charges for possession of child pornography, that is unfortunately all that Judge Mary Roberts could do.
Wait, that's what was brought from the house
From
or the
this
computer?
discovery, yes, the house. So sorry, that was a little confusing.
Okay.
The 2013 incident, nothing happened to
Nothing
anybody.
came.
But 2017 hits.
One brother got 9 months.
So far, the middle brother had 9 months. Okay, that's it. She did restrict his ability to interact with minors. No additional charges. So without anything more, there's no more time that can be given. He originally denied having any sexual interest in children or really anyone. He claims to be asexual. So the detective inquired why he would have so many cutout images of children from magazines. And he said, well, he wasn't aroused. He just was curious. His brother Edwin must have been confused when he was asking for images to be printed on the computer. The eldest brother, Charles Emery, who I should note worked as a janitor at the Seattle Children's Hospital for 20 years, had all charges dropped against him. Born on October 15th, 1934, at 82 years old, the judge ruled that he was mentally ill due to the dementia, and he, quote, lacks the capacity to understand the proceedings and assist in the defense. Next steps would be to civilly commit him, so basically put him in a home. I will say that some of the items found in the house that can be directly associated with him are pretty incriminating. He had a collection of materials related to the sexual assault and murder of female children. This was referred to as his manifesto. Several of these included notes written detailing the brothers' imaginations of what they would do to children if given the chance. The niece who made the discovery of the photos is known as TW in the court documents, and she came forward to police to let them know that she had been victimized by her uncles, aka the Emery brothers. TW also indicated that her mother, Edna, noted as EV in the documents, had also been a victim from years prior. Edna is actually Edwin's twin sister, and she claimed that all three brothers sexually abused her growing up.
And what happened to these brothers? That's all I'm thinking is like when they were kids, obviously something.
And I don't know if we'll know.
To say like, let's live in a house full of child pornography.
It was a rampant sex abuse house, so it's very likely it happened to them as well. So Edna actually tells police that she was removed from the home at age 10 and put into foster care for her own protection. So it was obviously known, but because of the time, maybe the era, it just wasn't something.
So instead of doing anything to treat,
they just removed the girl.
Anything for these boys.
And just left them there to live there. So her daughter TW described to investigators that her mother Edna was abused from the time she was a toddler till she was removed at 10 years old. Edwin would often put her on his lap and touch her vagina and breast area. Charles would dress her up in socks and shoes and played with her feet and rubbed them on his genitals. She said Charles would sometimes give her alcohol prior to his assaults. So she didn't always remember what happened, but she does remember that he digitally penetrated her vagina on multiple occasions and regularly took nude photos of her or while wearing swimwear. So it's very interesting that it's almost like their fetishes line up with the things they were finding. The shoes, clearly, like the middle brother. Stopped. Yeah, it's horrifying. I can't imagine this woman's young life. Police continued to investigate these brothers and their home for a very long period of time. In fact, in the court documents, there is a reference to evidence of a homicide. I mentioned earlier that there was a burned pink hat found partially buried. That hat has led to a lot of speculation, but even more sinister than that were the multiple missing child flyers found at the home. In fact, a flyer of Lindsay Baum was found on the premises, and the brothers own a home just a few miles from Lindsay's town. So there have been suggestions that the brothers could potentially be looked at in connection to Lindsay's disappearance. 1 month after the Emery brothers' arrest in 2017, 2 hunters would find a partial human skull in a remote part of central Washington. This discovery was in the mountains roughly 17 miles west of Ellensburg. The remains were not immediately linked to any specific case. It was a very small fragment, and it took a lot of testing to get a DNA match. But when they did, a year later, 2018, the DNA was a match for Lindsay Baum. That piece of her skull had been located over 100 miles from where she disappeared, giving investigators a fresh lead and a new area to comb for suspects. Typically, when a body is found, the case falls into the jurisdiction of where they found it. However, since this was confirmed to be Lindsay and it was already an investigation in progress, Grays Harbor Sheriff's Office will continue to own the case, but they are getting a help from the Kittitas County Sheriff, where they found the piece of the skull. When the information regarding the Emery brothers hit the media, it was disclosed that police had in fact brought cadaver dogs to the brothers' property. The whispers of a possible connection to murder, the loads of children's clothing, shoes, and missing flyers, it was definitely possible that there was a connection to Lindsay and police wanted to discover it right away. However, there has been no confirmation that the cadaver dogs made any discovery on the property indicating there had been a dead body at any time on the land. So there's no really official word out there whether the police actually believe they're connected, but it's definitely a possibility. I haven't even heard an argument on why the brothers would have a reason to be in Central Oregon. They're already elderly at that point. And it's a rough terrain. Like where these hunters found her, it is partial. Most of the year, you can't even get to it because it's in the mountains.
Yeah, well, and 10 years old, I mean, 10-year-olds are bigger and stronger.
She was like 90 pounds.
Yeah, so yeah, if you're older and frail and whatever, and someone only saw one person.
But if it's multiple brothers and they murder her in the town and just dispose of her there, you could potentially carry. I just think the terrain is too rough for elderly
with what it
people.
sounded like. I mean, maybe that's just my brain because it's unfathomable to think that 3 brothers are living together their whole lives and just having these horrible sexual fetishes, and then they also become like, hey guys, let's take it further and murder people. It's possible, but my brain almost can't. It's a nightmare to think about. My brain can't. My brain's like, no, that's a horror movie. That can't be real.
But to be honest, really, anybody could be connected. So someone like that is more likely.
Yeah.
You know?
And so are they still looking at, and I forgot the name, the first guy you said, the one who told the girlfriend?
They do have, as far as I know, there are still 2 suspects that they're really heavily looking at. And at least one of them was one I've already described. So I don't think they're ruling anyone out. They just don't have anything. They have nothing until they can find some sort of evidence on a person or find the rest of her remains and get DNA. I don't think we'll ever know. So a couple of years ago, a private investigator joined the case. So her name is Rose Winquist, and she's been a PI since 1988 and owns a company, Winquist Investigations, in the Seattle area. Her team works on a number of cases from elder exploitation, security fraud, and of course, missing persons. Now, she had been following the Lindsay Baum case for years and ultimately came to her mother, Melissa, and offered her services for free. And I think that's really great. I mean, it is like awesome. Free publicity because it's a huge case, but
that's a lot of work for.
It is. And as a mother, I think she felt compelled.
Yep.
You know, everyone's sitting there watching. This could happen to anybody. Every mother I know has left their kid alone for a few minutes or couldn't find them in a store or let them walk home from school. So it could happen to anyone.
Yeah.
Yes, it's rare to have this stranger abduction, if it is a stranger.
Right.
But I think she felt compelled to help her. Mm-hmm. I read an article from the Daily Chronicle about Rose's work on the case, and I thought it was very interesting. In it, they ask her, how do you start on a case like this? And she kind of appealed to my nerd brain, where she said she sits down objectively and looks at it like data points. So you're basically parsing through the data, you know. And in this case, she describes it as having 500,000 data points. Now, these could be anything from like facts like Lindsay is 10, Lindsay is female, to other things collected like the timeline. You know, she was last seen at a video store that day, or she was at the pool with her friends. So all of those little things form this story that can be told. And in it, there's going to be other factors that maybe aren't facts, but they're well-knowns, or this person in the area has a history of child molestation. That's a data point you would consider, right? So she said she basically looks through that. And by doing that, she has her own 20 persons of interest that she formed. And there wasn't a mention whether or not they overlap the police, because I don't think they have a very open communication to each other.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, I don't think the police is very
usually
keen
aren't
on
into
that.
that.
But I imagine there's going to be some overlap there. So the discovery of the partial skull has definitely given her a new data point, and she's excited about that because it gives you a whole new area to consider. Who in Lindsay's life knew that she knew lives there, or who has a reason to drive that distance from that town? You know, is it a truck driver?
Well, and now you know someone was gone at some point for a chunk of time, whether it was that exact night or...
Like the guy where the neighbors are like, well, we haven't seen him in days, but we definitely saw him that night.
Yeah.
That's suspicious.
Yeah.
Did he maybe travel there? Can they find, hopefully, any kind of video in a gas station that they could pinpoint someone's car? So it does open up a whole new realm of possibilities. Now, over the years that she's worked the case, she does have her own opinion on what happened. She thinks the perpetrator was either known to Lindsay or knew of Lindsay in some way. She is quoted as saying that Lindsay was likely very easily coaxed into the car, and she does believe that she had been sexually assaulted and maybe was killed because she was going to tell.
That makes sense because it's not late at night, but late enough that you're probably able to hear more things and what's going on. And so if you don't know her and you try to take her, she's going to make a ruckus.
And she's very much described as a outgoing individual, the kind of person who's loud and not a meek child, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yelling and running away wouldn't have been an issue.
Right.
I don't think. So
she was probably
you have someone you know
incapacitated.
going, oh, Lindsay, right? Oh, yeah, I know, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to give you a ride or whatever.
And maybe it was that person that was following her and she knew that. And there is definitely a likelihood that she would tell if she's like, hey, mom, you know, he touched me inappropriately or something. So I think that is a very valid idea of what happened. I mean, of course, we won't ever know. One of the most interesting things I got out of that article was that she thinks the skull fragment that was located was actually washed downhill from a flood that happened in 2011. So she has a strong belief that if they were to look uphill and do more searches, that they could potentially find clothes, the rest of her remains, or maybe even DNA left by the killer. So searches did continue for a year after the discovery because they had to wait for snowmelt. It's that bad up the mountain, they couldn't even get up there. So they will probably continue to look, and hopefully some hiker or hunter will find more.
Yeah.
Half of the remains that were found of Lindsay now reside in a pendant that hangs around her mother's neck. But somewhere out there, the rest of Lindsay still remains, and we do hope someone finds her. Lindsay was a talkative and friendly little girl who loved her friends and family, even if she loved to fight with her older brother. And like many of us, she was a fan of Harry Potter and Twilight, a girl after my own heart. She liked movies and having sleepovers with her friends. And while her family has moved on from McCleary, Washington due to the painful memories, the town still mourns for the little girl they all lost. Everyone wants to know what happened to Lindsay and get some justice for her murder. There's a $45,000 reward for the tip that leads to the arrest and conviction of Lindsay Baum's killer. If you have information that could help solve this case, please call the confidential tip line at 360-964-1799. I still come back to the burning of that stuff in the house. I really think she was covering up something for her family's
If
safe
it
face.
was known that that their sister and she were molested along
Her mother.
with right.
Yeah.
And that they saved the liquor bottle and all this stuff, I would not doubt that they were taking pictures back in the day or whatever.
Like, put
and it's
yourself in that position. You're finding loads of stuff. You know they're going to get busted on it. So you might as well save your family.
What's 10 pictures? What's 100 pictures if it's...
Especially if you're willing to tell them. Like,
and
I'll describe it.
I don't want to go to trial. I don't want to relive all of this. I don't want to have this splashed around. I don't want this on the internet. I do not blame her.
Yeah.
And good for her for turning in her own family. I mean, she obviously knew how they were and how they treated her.
She probably didn't realize how it went beyond her, you know? Right. Like, maybe she knew of her mom.
I really, I can't even... I really can't process the idea of that house. I can't imagine that you have that. Not only do you have that fetish, but that then you're able to start to talk about it, and they're like, we're game, and then everyone's okay with the house. I think it started young.
I think it starts in childhood. You see it happening, and in your household, it's normal, so everybody does it. Yeah. That's what happened.
Oh, absolutely.
That has to be it.
Absolutely, but it's just you. I mean, I've never heard of...
it's not like they're telling people outside. I can't say for sure they weren't part of a pedophile ring online or something.
Right.
Because there's speculation about that. But I don't think they were interacting with people in their outside life.
But it's just wild. It's just wild to think.
It is.
It makes sense. Obviously, something happened in the house, happened when they're young. They're exposed to this abuse, and you see that all the time where some people then become the abusers. Some people then become, more vulnerable and they continue to be abused, or they get angry. I mean, there's just a million things that come from that. Yeah. And so to have three of them kind of land in the same realm, it's not like one of them was, what happened to us was totally messed up and now I'm angry and I'm going to fight against this. Or what happened to us was totally messed up and now I'm feeling this vulnerability and I continue to put myself in places that are not healthy, or I. And so it's like,
I know.
I can't. And I'm picturing like hoarder houses and just imagining all of that shit and having it be.
I'm sure that those crime scene investigators needed some therapy after that. Like, that's fucked. That's unheard of.
I know. Well, until now when you just heard it.
That's ghostly.
Heretofore unheard.
I'm sorry.
Let me translate. Hitterford unturned.
I hope it falls out of your shorts.
Oh, it did! It fell out of his shorts just like you said.
I'm a time teller. I mean, wait, what?
They call me the time teller.
It's 4:18.
Fortune teller.
I'm a time teller.
The time teller has returned from the void.
Time teller, might you use your powers right now?
Want to see my boogers?
Her greatest weapon.
I was asking you to tell me the time.
Oh,
But...
it is 10:51.
Oh, the time teller has spoken.
She strikes again. Want to see my
Want to
boogers?
see my boogers?
That's her catchphrase. Write that down. That's good.
Shut your holes.
Who amongst you wants to see my boogers?
Criminals. Fear
My boogers tell the time of your death.
Ooh, you put them in a bottom of tea.
Oh.
Does not have a happy ending. Jonathan Brandis was just a gorgeous delight with those eyelashes.
Oh, ladybugs.
I fucking love ladybugs, and I loved that show he was on where he had a dolphin friend, Einstein.
Sequest, DSV.
Sequest. Let me sneak into funny.
Nearly 100 law enforcement officers and FBI agents working the. I said case twice.
You stupid fucking idiot. Well, it had to have, and I think I love chocolate the way you love cream cheese.
Maybe,
and they're very different, and that explains our palates. Good day.
Goodbye.
The taste teller.
I'm the taste teller. Did you want to smell my farts?
Is that a spider? It is.
Oh, shit. Wow, that is substantial.
So you're just gonna put him outside?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Quick, he's gonna hide. You lost him.
He jumped. He's gone.
No. What kind of man are you?
Pacifist, I guess.
Wait. You lost him how? Like
I
you
had it.
found-
Oh, it's right here. It's right here. It's right here.
Throw up!
He scooped it.
Did it bite you?
Yeah, I have powers now.